everyone, and welcome to Silverline Silver Sunday on this April the 5th, 2026. I'm excited to be here. I didn't get to finish my Facebook post. Wait, we're actually live on Facebook without any issues this time. So that's good. Welcome, Facebook.
Now that'll change.
So yes, I'm your host. I'm Roller Man, and I'm excited to be here today. Joined as I'm trying to read his little blurb there, by the mild annoyance himself, Mr. Tom Mason. Say hi, Tom.
Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. That's right. Thank you, Tom. You covered for me there. Tom and I, of course, are joined by MillertonGazette.substack.com, the man in the mask guy himself, Mr. Mike W. Belcher. Say hi, Mike.
Hey, everybody. Happy Easter.
Let me get
you moved it so people can see me now.
I got the logo off of you. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so we're excited to be here, and we have a special guest with us. It's just Howard. Just Howard, that's all. That's it.
When I wrote Spider-Man books, I wrote Spider-Man that we referred to as adjective. Oh my God, I can't speak. See, I'm old. It's late. There was no adjective.
Adjectiveless.
Yes, there you go.
So yeah,
and now you got one name like Cher.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yes,
Howard. So those of you in the chat, if you've got some questions for Howard, please drop them in the chat, and we'll get them asked of him. Before we get there, though, anybody have any news? What happened this past? I wasn't here last week, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. But anybody got any news?
I do, apparently.
What's your news, Tom?
My book comes out in October 15th, and I can't talk about it yet. But apparently, I've been assigned a publicist, so now I have a publicist.
Oh, wait? So it comes out October, but you can't talk about it yet.
Not yet. I got to clear it with my publicist.
Okay, so this is not
Lilo and Stitch. Sound like? That's I'm sorry.
This is not Lilo and Stitch.
No. This is another one.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
So as soon as you can talk about it, you'll talk about it here.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Excellent.
You'll be the first, Roland.
Very good. Mike, what about you? Any news for you?
Hey, I just put Man the Mask #7 to bed today.
All right.
I literally did the last balloon before we came on here.
Oh, excellent.
The last balloon. That sounds like a Netflix show. The Last Balloon.
Hey, that's my trademark. Then I said it first.
It's about the last 3 hours of Jack Kirby's life, where he's that documentary.
Well, I'm excited. Most of you guys know this already, but my daughter got married on last Sunday, a week from today. So,
congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Did you get invited?
Did what?
Were you invited?
Yes, we were invited. we spent the weekend up in Nashville last weekend. So it was a gorgeous wedding. A little windy, so we said because it was an outdoor. It was in a pavilion, but it was in the hills of Tennessee, so it was a beautiful setting. We have been instructed. Things are different these days than when we were that age. We have been instructed not to post any pictures until they post the official pictures. So even though my phone's not in here, even though our phones have pictures that that we all took standing around. We can't post any until they have posted the official pictures. Right. And when asked, when's that going to be? We don't know.
They're busy. They're newlyweds. So at what point? So this took place in West Virginia? No, Tennessee.
No, Tennessee. Yeah.
At what point did you pass around the jug?
Well, that's at the beginning of the wedding. Okay. I was very, 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 very tempted to bring a shotgun and walk down the aisle with it. But my daughter told me, Daddy, do not. Yeah. During the rehearsals, when the preacher said, who gives this man away or who gives this woman away to be married? Right. I answered every time. I went, her ma and me.
We done it.
Brittany said, Daddy, please don't do that during the wedding. I said, why not? Because what you may not know is she married a Yankee. I'm not sure where I went wrong, fellas.
Well, good for her.
So is he Mason or Dixon?
half, you know, they bride's side, groom's side, you know, half of the folks there were the all of them, you know, flew down from New York. And so I told her, I said, please let me do it. They don't know me. They've never heard me. And if I say her ma and me, they're going to think, oh my gosh, what's she getting married?
You got to do it.
She wouldn't let me do it. I love my daughter enough that I decided I'd rather.
Well, then here's the thing, Roland. You got to save all that sort of hillbilly posturing, and for the like when you guys get together for a big like family function, like a Thanksgiving dinner or a Christmas dinner or whatever, you pull that out because nobody's watching. It's not as big as a wedding.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a blast. We had a lot of fun. It was gorgeous. The reception afterwards was very nice. A lot of hers and his friends showed up, and they did a whole bunch of dance, and they're into line dance, and so there was a whole bunch of line dancing that went on. But it was a gorgeous wedding. Say again?
Did you break a hip? Throw your back out? Anything like that?
I did not break a hip. I've been doing my exercises and my stretches, and I'm pretty good.
All right.
I didn't do too much joking though, so. We got some comments coming through here. Javier Lugo says, Happy Easter. Thanks, Javier. Thanks for hanging out with us. David A. Scooterez, what's up, David? Happy Easter to you. He said, Tom's hitting the red carpet.
Only if the publisher provides the red carpet.
That's right. Then he says, congrats to your family, Roland. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate the good thoughts. Matt Likes Comics says, hey, everybody. I guess the wedding was a blast. It was indeed a blast. And I will share pictures just as soon as they allow us to share. So, but that's it for the news. Now, you guys got your questions ready? I got my questions ready for Howard.
Cheat sheet. You did research.
All right, Howard. So the first question I like to start off with when we get a guest like yourself here is, what's the first comic you remember little Howard reading? What's the first comic you remember?
Well, I don't have a specific issue number or anything like that, but I am the youngest in my family. I have 3 older sisters, much older than I am. And so and I grew up in Brooklyn.
Okay.
They were all working in New York City at the time. And at some point when I was about 4 or 5 years old, my sister's on their way home from work on payday. You know, every subway stop in New York City used to have a newsstand.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And
we missed those.
They thought, oh, maybe I'll look good to my baby brother and bring home some comics. Now, the first comics they brought home to me were, Harvey Comics,
right?
Richie Rich, a lot of
stuff.
Little Dot, those, and then Archie Comics, because those were the ones they wanted to read.
Right.
So those were what started me out. But then one of them brought home, it was either a Batman or Superman or a combination,
right.
Comics, and it was, off to the races then. And
right.
And then I was getting Spider-Man comics and Fantastic Four and all that. And basically it encouraged me to learn how to read. Yeah. Because they were reading them to me. And then I wanted to know, I think they skipped the captions. and I wanted to know
what the heck,
what was going on everywhere. And so I became an early reader because of comics.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, so what comic was it that made you decide this is what I want to do? I want to go make comics.
I didn't. I got forced into it.
Okay, now we'll get to that story, but there's not a comic you didn't. So there wasn't a comic that you read and you said, I want to do this.
No,
right.
I never thought that people did it. Do you know what I mean? It was like
right.
just appeared. Yeah. And I remember I didn't pay attention to credits. Friends of mine, I was just talking to a buddy of mine, Bob Harris, the other day. And I said, I remember sitting at the dining room table of a friend of mine named Johnny Alberico. Johnny, if you're out there, hey.
That's a Brooklyn name if ever I heard one.
And it was in the winter. We all brought our comics to his house, and we sat and we tried to copy what was going on there. And it was Spider-Man comics at the time, but I never paid attention to
who was doing it,
did it. And it wasn't until many years later, 1984, where my first day at Marvel, I was being walked around showing how comics did. And okay, now we're going to take you to the art department, the art correction department at that point, to meet the art director. And it was John Romita. And it was like, poof, light bulb. I said, wait a minute. I almost remember that name.
I've seen that name somewhere before.
And so there were a series of those moments for me, because and we may get into this more, but I had drifted from comics for a while.
Okay.
Like in my teen year or late teen years, I wasn't reading comics as vociferously as I did when I was a kid.
Well, isn't that what Stanley used to say, right? He used to say that, you know, primarily boys at the time, but once they hit like 16, they discover girls and cars, and they drift away from comics.
And they usually have a job with extra money to spend on girls and cars.
Yes, and that was it. And so so there was nothing that made me decide to want to, not only to want to write comics, but to work in comics in general. I thought, people do this, and they make money.
How did that get you to Marvel Comics then? How did you get a job there?
Well, I made the natural transition, as I say, in that I was working for an international exporting company as a traffic manager.
Okay,
And then I made the transition to assistant editor at Marvel Comics. Along the way, a childhood friend of mine, whose name may be familiar to you all, Mike Carlin. Who he and I we met when we were about 12 years old, I would say. We were there. It's Brooklyn. It's hard to really describe, but there was a swim club. Okay, sounds very fancy, right? It was underneath an elevated train line. Okay, so it was not as fancy as it sounds. But within there were two groups of teens. And I always describe it as Mike was the coolest guy in the nerd group, and I was the nerdiest guy in the cool group. and like over the years, I mean, we met when we were 12, but over the years, you know, people started peeling off. And one day we were like almost the last people standing in the groups, and he was going to art school, high school of art and design at a point. He was always drawing. He's a very talented cartoonist, Mike, that a lot of people are unaware of that. Exceptionally talented cartoonist, but in a very cartoony way. You realize
sounds like Mr. Mason.
Well, I know I've met Carlin a couple of times, and he's also posted some of the stuff he tried to submit to the New Yorker when he was a young person.
Yeah, I believe I made the introduction to him to the New Yorker editor at the time, the cartoon editor, because somebody I worked with at the exporting company had connections with magazine publishing, and through Omni magazine, the science magazine. And then they knew somebody in New Yorker, and they met. So anyway, that's how he submitted at the time. But as with many of us, like I wanted to draw. And then you start being around all the actual artists. And I can't do this.
It cured me of that as well. I wanted to be an artist too. And then I met real artists, and it's like, oh, all right, I'm not you.
Right.
Yeah. You're like,
anyway,
Mike, my tracing was a whole lot easier than what you're doing now.
Yes. But Mike and I became very good friends, and we we started like we were very much into the same kind of music in the 70s and early 80s, new wave music. And so we used to go out to see a lot of bands every weekend. And Mike eventually, he did do some his first work at Marvel was for Crazy.
Oh wow.
Okay.
And he had Mike Carlin's Pageo stuff and some other stuff like that. And then eventually an assistant editor gig opened up. And that's how he got into working, as a comic professional.
Right.
And then he and I were going out to these clubs, and I'm working for the exporting company and whining about the job. God, this is so boring. I got to think of something else to do. And I was job hunting at that point. As a matter of fact, at that time in the New York Times, when the help wanted ads, the CIA was hiring.
Oh, really?
And they were advertising in the New York Times. I thought, oh, that'd be cool. I've seen James Bond. Yeah, I could do that. And I thought about applying. I did not. But I took a test to become a New York City police officer. I chose not to do it. But Carlin eventually said, Howard, this is really boring listening to you complain. I just got a promotion. My job is open as an assistant editor, and it's a personality fit as much as anything, because I don't know if you were up to the Marvel offices in those days, but you basically had like a 10 by 10 office that housed the editor and his assistant.
Right.
And it was going to be working for Mark Grunewald.
Right.
And and at that point, because Mike had been working at Marvel for 2 years, he was just inundating me with free comics. So I was caught up on continuity. So, I had this gap, but then, I got caught up. And, when this was, the heyday of, Frank Miller was on Daredevil. And Walt Simonson had started his Thor run. And this was stuff that just spoke to me. So I thought, wow, comic books are really cool.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed for that job and I got hired.
Wow.
But it paid so little money that I took it just to. I had been at that exporting company for 9 years. I started out when I was in high school. I was an office boy, and I kind of worked my way up.
Right.
And I thought, I think my pay was almost half.
Really?
Of what
gosh.
That's
crazy.
But it wasn't that. It was really just to kind of break the habit and see. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I'll be there for as long as I can. And a few things happened. Number one, the first day that I walked into the office, 9:00 Monday morning, I walk into the office. Mark met me at reception, walked me back, and it was a really cute young woman sitting on the couch that we had in my office. And I went, oh, okay. Well, this isn't going to be a bad place.
This is not what I thought comics would be.
Yeah, I've met comic book guys, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And I thought, so the place is going to have a lot of cute women. There were some. Anyway, the cute young woman is going to be walking up the stairs in a few minutes. We go to bed herself. She and I started dating, and we got married 42 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
40 years.
So far, this whole thing sounds like a fairy tale version of how to break into comics.
Yeah, well, yes.
I'm a friend, get a job, meet a hot woman, get married, live happily ever after.
and then I'm working with Mark.
Yeah.
And you pointed out earlier off camera, Iron Man.
Yeah.
I was working for Mark. Denny O'Neil was writing Iron Man at that time, and he was in the office. He was also on staff, and he was in the office next to ours.
Great writer.
Yeah,
Great editor.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And a great guy.
Yeah.
And but he had a falling out with the editor-in-chief at the time.
At the time.
Yes, and he was fired. And I mean, ultimately it worked out for him.
Right. Yeah.
Because Carlin had also been fired at that point. And they all there you go. Yes.
I use Denny's book as a textbook in my class.
Yeah, as everyone should.
Yes, I agree.
I was sitting. So now he's gone. He was in the middle of a storyline, and Mark and I are sitting at our desks and trying to figure out what to do. Yeah. And Mark said, "We need to find somebody to write the next part of this story." I said, "Yes, we do." And he said, "It needs to be somebody that knows what Denny was planning." I said, "Yes, it does." And he said, "It's going to be you." And I said, "Oh, no, it's not." And he gave me one of the best lines that anybody could have given to me, because I used it later on, not only as an editor myself, but as a dad. Speaking to my kids, because what Mark said when I said no, he said, "Oh, Howard, I'm sorry, you're confusing what we're having right now for a conversation." he said, "You are writing it." he felt that it was really important for, if you're going to be an editor, to experience the other side of the desk.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, and it was not common practice at Marvel. He had to get special permission from the editor-in-chief at the time, and he had to step back at a certain point and hand over the actual editing to another editor. But he busted my ass. Excuse my language. I think I rewrote that story, the first plot, because I worked Marvel Method. I rewrote that about 6-7 times. You know,
wow.
This is in the days before we had computers. So
you're typing.
Typewriter.
Copy and pasting meant you made a photocopy, you cut stuff out, and you used Scotch tape to put it on the paper. And that was Iron Man number 211.
211.
Which is I have the splash page of that issue hanging over my workspace, which I've had ever since then, because Alex Saviak, who was the artist, was the first. It's the Return of the Living Laser. I can see you looking it up right now.
I am. I'm trying to get it up here on the screen real quick.
There you go.
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
I also have
what a great cover.
Yep. Oh, they were so proud of this cover because it has so many overlays.
Yeah.
But yes, that's and so that was my first job. I didn't think that was going to lead to anything else. I had no problem writing. I enjoyed writing. I really didn't want anybody to read what I wrote. You know, I think I would have been better off just keeping a diary. But what happened was it came out. The editor-in-chief came down to the office, said, you know, not a bad first attempt. No Shakespeare, and it should be. And after he left, I turned to Mark and I said, "So should my next thing, if I do, be an iambic pentameter?" I didn't know that. But what happened was, all of a sudden, you know, editors started saying to me, "Hey, I didn't know you could write." I said, you know, the jury's still out on that one.
I can write 5 or 6 plots all at the same time.
Yes. So that was my first job, and then I just kept getting asked to do more stuff.
Wow.
I lucked out.
Yeah. Man Likes Comics says Harvey is very underrated. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, there are
Ken B says
Jacobson, who
he is visiting. Happy Easter, homies. Happy Easter to you, Ken.
Happy Easter.
Thanks for hanging out with us, man. If you got questions for Howard, be sure you post them. We'll get them asked. So, you know, I have to ask. So, you said you started working at the export place in high school. Mm-hmm. So, did you have any post high school training to be an editor? Did you go to art school? Did you go to college? Did you?
I did go to college.
Okay.
I was a marketing and advertising major.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I guess that helped me market myself
Yeah.
to editors.
Yeah.
But the requirements at that time, like I've often said, if today it would be impossible for me to even get an interview at Marvel.
Right.
I went to college. I didn't graduate from college.
Okay.
And I had no.
You didn't study the right stuff.
No, exactly.
Right.
And so all of my training came on the job.
On the job.
And that and it was the real benefit to the way Marvel worked the system at that point, with having the editor and his assistant in the same office. It was nonstop training. Yeah. And whether like Mark made a real effort to train me, but most of the stuff came through osmosis, and also the talented people I got to work with. I mean, I was the editor, the assistant editor on the Avengers line of books, and I learned a lot, I will tell you, from working with Tom Palmer.
Oh yeah,
Tom Palmer.
Now, was that for the Roger Stern?
Roger Stern and John Buscema run.
Oh, that was a great run. Yeah. And it was a phenomenal learning opportunity for me. And like I said, Tom, I said this to him a number of years ago, right before he passed, that he was so generous with teaching me kind of the nuance of certainly the art side of it all. And because I had inking is a little tough to understand if you don't quite know what it is, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. And still, I just had this conversation with my friend Terry Kavanaugh. It's like there are certain aspects of comic book creation, like when people come to me at conventions and they want me to like look at their portfolio or read a script or whatever. Inking is the one where, for me, it's like, oh yeah, that works or it doesn't work. Right. I'll usually say, but who you should go talk to is Klaus Janson. He can tell. I can tell you it's not working for me, but I can't tell you how to fix it. Right. Sometimes that's disingenuous there. I can identify certain mistakes, but I can't always
stop using a ballpoint pen.
Yes, exactly. But so I had, and I was at that time, and then I was working with Alan Milgram. And Walt was just, he was also there, Walt Simonson. Because I got to come on to the Thor book as well. Okay. And so I was learning from everybody around me, and it was an ideal time to work in comics too, because even the guys that were in the bullpen, there was Danny Crespi who did lettering for most of the classic comics and designed logos that we all grew up with. And
that's not a name I know.
Really? He was a letterer, and he was the production. Head of production at Marvel when I started. Okay. And Jack Abel, who
that name I know.
He was in the bullpen. Maury Kuramoto, who was a letterer. So I'm working, and here's a name that most people don't know his real name. His name was George Rousseau. Yeah. Okay. He was the guy that colored every cover that we put out at that time. Those were done on staff, and it was George, and he had a little cubicle, or it wasn't a cubicle, it was a closet, basically. But George, in the heyday, he was an inker, and his name was George. He inked, because a lot of guys worked under pseudonyms because they wanted to get advertising work, and if their name was associated with comic books, they couldn't get the advertising work. Right. So George Rousseau was George Bell, who inked Kirby all over the place. And as a matter of fact, years later, when I was on staff, it was right when we started doing the Marvel Masterworks. Okay. And Craig Anderson was the editor of those. And his main job was to put them together, find the plates that you could reprint them off of and all that, but then also to get the artists paid, because they were going to get reprint money.
Right.
And it was like $15 a page for reprint money. And one day I walked into Craig. So I was, hey, Craig, how you doing? He's good. And I said, how's it going with Masterworks? He said, yeah, it's good. And he had like a stack this high of vouchers that he had filled out. But he said, I just don't know how to get a hold of this guy. It was George Bell.
Oh.
And I said, oh, Craig, let me do you a favor. Come with me. And I walked him down the hall to George's little
meeting.
And I said, Craig Anderson, George Bell. Now carry on. And George came to me a few weeks later and he said, Howard, thank you so much for doing that, because I just got a big check.
I would imagine, yeah.
I want to let you know that $15 a page is twice as much as I was making.
Really? Oh, man.
Yeah. So this was a really fine windfall for me.
Wow.
So
that's great.
Yeah. But that was it. That was Marvel at the time. You know, I got to work with all these guys, and even, my contemporaries, the people, that I was working with, and, as fellow editors or assistant editors. It was Bob Harris and Terry Kavanaugh. We were assistant editors together, and Bobby Chase later on, and, Ann Nesenti was an editor, Danny Fingerup, Jim Salcrup. I mean, but they were names.
It's a hot bunch. Yeah.
Yes.
Very, very much so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic lineup. As we like to say.
Yeah.
Matt says, how do you live on $15 a page? Those are reprint. That's reprint, Matt. And as Howard was saying, it was even less than that when he did it the first time around. So
right, but the first time he did it was in the 60s, and it was not necessarily a living wage.
Right.
But also, comic books were an art form, but they were a business.
Right.
And so you had to learn to be fast.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you a question, and this may be getting way ahead of where we want to be. Do you think that's changed? Do you think is it still a legitimate statement?
Which one? Business and
comics are an art form, but they're a business.
Yes, but it's been separated quite a bit. It's a very lucrative business for some, and a struggling art form for others. And I was very lucky at the time that I got into comics, because aside from the page rate, which was what it was,
right?
And I was doing it as an adjunct to my staff job,
right?
But then comics were selling really well.
They were,
And we didn't get royalties, because you couldn't call it a royalty, because a royalty implies ownership, and it was all work for hire. What we got was incentives. Yes. And the incentive was the better, in theory, was the better the work is, the higher the sales, more money you get. And the incentive check came 9 months after publication. So like
to allow for returns on the newsstand.
And I didn't know what any of that meant. I mean, but seriously, I didn't know. I knew what comics sold. I didn't know. But so the first time I got an incentive check, I went, oh, wow. That's not a big, because I worked when I was an assistant editor. One of the books we edited was the official handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Right.
And it was a very labor editorial intensive,
I imagine,
project. And so that meant sometimes we were working, we didn't get overtime because
your salary
didn't get,
right.
And so but sometimes we were working till 10, 11 o'clock at night to get get books done. And Mark decided that he was going to fight to get me. I mean, he was able to. He got points. You know, he got a percentage of sales since he was doing a lot of the work, including the writing of it. And he decided to get me like half a percent or something like that. Yeah. And I didn't. Again, I said, "Oh, okay, thank you,
thank you."
I don't know what that means. And I even said to Deb, my wife, I said, "Yeah, apparently I'm going to get some money, you know, a few months from now." And all of a sudden, it started rolling in, and it was significant. It was like, you know, once a month I was getting maybe half of my monthly salary in incentives, because those books sold really well.
Yeah, they were huge.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, this is not bad at all.
Yeah, can we do another one?
Yes, exactly. And so that, you know, that was nice. And then, you know, I started writing right at the time where everything kind of blew up. Yeah. So yeah, it was nice.
David S. Gutierrez says, "Thank you for the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. It made me a fan for life."
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah. Matt Likes Comics says, Kurt Swan said he only slept 4 hours a night most of the time while working.
Yeah. Because he put
that tracks. I mean, I used to I was we were joking earlier about how early I go to bed now.
Yeah. We didn't do that live. Yeah.
Back in the day, I when I first went off staff and was a freelance writer, I didn't go to bed until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
That was because it was also perfect time in the house. I had 2 young kids. You know, it was quiet.
Golden hours
too.
Right.
Yeah. And
we're done.
Yeah. So that's what I did. And I had deluded myself into thinking, my wife had agreed that, okay, you work as late as you want, and then I will keep the kids quiet, or, you know, in the morning so that you can sleep in. And she did, but there's like an awareness that there was stuff going on in the house. So I never slept in. So it was not uncommon for me to get at most 4 or 5 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
But,
now, also, so when you were working there too, you mentioned the incentive check coming several months later. Now that was a point in time when the newsstand market was slowly going away, and we were going to the direct market.
Yeah.
Did you, because you were learning all this stuff on the job, is this something that you kind of became aware of as while you were an editor there, or is it something that you became aware of when you were writing?
Which part about
how the market was shifting from newsstand to direct market?
It had started before I got there, the shift, although we were still actively looking at and analyzing newsstand sales.
Yeah.
And we would, at that point, I think when I first started, the direct market was kind of a novelty.
Right.
I think, but we were very focused on newsstand, which is why covers were very, very important.
Right.
And, you know, they had to be unique. And it's something I feel is missing sometimes in the industry, that, you know,
we might get you back on and have a discussion about nothing but that.
Yeah. But it was one of those things where, you know, it was drilled into us that there was and this played into, you know, the marketing and advertising part of my brain, which is, we wanted, when everything was racked, we wanted there to be something that piqued the potential reader's interest to pick the book up and just look at the cover. And that cover should reflect what was going to happen inside the book. Right. So then the next thing they would do is potentially open that cover up. And that's when the splash page was like, something had to be happening on that splash page that made them want to keep going.
Yeah.
And if we got that, we thought we got the sale.
Yeah.
And that's why logos were very important. I mean, and quite frankly, what we did learn early on is one of the best names and logos, period, because you can see it from a mile away.
Yeah.
You know, you can walk into a store.
Yep. And that's about all you saw right there.
Yeah. And oh, Iron Man, let me see what that's about.
Right. Yeah.
You pick
Also,
it up.
The contrast helps too, because you have the black lettering on the light color.
Yeah. And Thor is another, great, 4 letters. It's right there.
Boom.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so I remember I drifted. No,
that's okay. That's all good. It's all good. Matt Likes Comics says official handbook made me interested in Marvel. Yeah.
Well, it taught you everything you needed to know.
Yeah, because the great thing about that book is if you joined Marvel late, let's say,
Yes.
and you're in the middle of a story that introduces a character you haven't seen before, there's a place that you can go that didn't exist before.
Yep.
It can tell you where that character first appeared, what his powers were, and what happened. And it's essential.
One of my first jobs on that book was, if you remember the format, there was the big figure shot of the character. You had all the history there. And then at the bottom, there was always a panel that showed their powers, to your point.
Yes.
And what Mark really wanted always was a panel to show cause and effect in the same panel. And now that, I don't know that anybody does it now, but it didn't always happen back in the day. And so sometimes we would have, I was given, the first assignment was, okay, if Byrne has drawn this character, you're going to find a cause and effect panel.
Right.
Because he always had that. So we were always lucky if Byrne had done the book, with Cyclops, you would see, him shooting the blast and it hitting something and breaking it in the same panel, which is great. But sometimes what we had to do was find 2 panels in the same book and merge them, and art before Photoshop.
Right.
We would bring it down to John Romita and his crew, Romita's Raiders, and they would art correct it, or sometimes Mark did it himself.
Really?
Because Mark experimented with drawing too, right?
He drew a Hawkeye series,
right?
And he didn't he? I forgot about that.
So, it was different times. I had a conversation with an editor, and it's going back like 10, 15 years maybe now, at Marvel, and we're talking about a project, and he was a younger guy because everybody is younger than me, and he was asking me. It got into like a fan thing, where he was starting to ask me a lot of questions. And I just offhandedly said, when I left staff at Marvel, and I worked on staff as an editor for exactly 7 years to the day, which is actually coming up. My 42nd anniversary in comics is coming up at the end of this month. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And he, I just said to him offhanded, when I left staff at Marvel in 1991, I said, I didn't have a computer. Nobody had a computer on their desk. And there's dead silence on the other end of the phone. I thought we got cut off. I said, hey, what's going on? And he said, Howard, I just don't know how you put out comics without computers. And I said, well, number one, we actually put out more than you're putting out now.
Right.
An editorial office's workload was more significant than yours is now. I said, and the simplest way, and it's to the point that I made earlier about the first plot. I said, that cut and paste function you have on your, on your Word program or whatever. I said that involved us using an X-Acto knife and rubber cement. We were actually cutting and pasting.
I think I've got an X-Acto knife somewhere here. Yeah, here we go.
Oh yeah.
I still have my X-Acto knife.
Oh yeah. No, I have a set of them around here as well.
Well, it's funny because we're not going to talk about ages, but I think I'm a couple of years younger than you. I began with an old Commodore 64. So, okay. I mean, I used the typewriter in high school, electronic typewriter, but I had a Commodore 64 by the time I started doing comic books. So I was working on now it didn't have all of the functions that it does today, but I've told Tom Mason, I remember when I moved out to California, this would have been in 92. Tom and his people were still doing a lot of cutting and pasting on the board.
Because we didn't have Photoshop then. We had computers, but they were more word processors. They weren't really art computers. You couldn't really do that stuff. It wasn't until 92, I think, thereabouts. So we started to get the graphics computers.
And that's it. You know, I left in 91.
Yeah.
And the internet didn't exist. You know, it's at that point, or not commonly. And then I
had email, I think in 89, AOL.
Yeah,
in 1989.
Yeah,
dial-up. Yeah, 300 baud modem. I still remember that.
You couldn't use any other electricity in your house while it was gone.
Exactly.
Couldn't get on the phone.
When I started writing, and you know, we all used typewriters, but the big innovation, and we all had them, and I still have mine, and it works actually, was a thing called a Canon TypeStar. Okay, so it was a typewriter. Okay, it looked like a closed desktop. Okay, it was about that footprint, and this was the thing that blew us all away. Okay, you had a full one-line.
Oh yeah.
Print, you know, a screen LED things. If you made a mistake, you could backspace.
I have Smith Corona that was just like that.
I remember that. Yeah,
and that's what I wrote Iron Man 211 on. You know, but we all had them because there was a place on East 33rd Street, you know, 5 blocks away from Marvel, that was selling them for, instead of $130, you can get it for $99. And then I would tell you,
now
every editor and every writer had one at that point.
Yeah. So you said you were an editor for 7 years.
Yes.
Before we get into why you left, what were some of your highlights as an editor there? What are some of the projects you said, man, I am so glad that I got to work with this project or this creator or whatever?
You know, not to talk negative at all.
No.
I was when I got promoted to full editor, I was given the New Universe books.
Okay.
Right. And honestly, the first thing I started to do was prepare my resume.
Oh no. Seriously. You know, so all right. So let me stop and ask you a question here. And if it strays too much, don't answer. Okay. The New Universe gets a lot of flack today, but having looked over it fairly recently, I think some of it is unfair because I think some of the New Universe stuff was pretty good.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
I think the last bit of the New Universe was really good as far as after the.
Well, thank you, because I was the editor. But it was a tough situation.
I can imagine that. Yeah,
because you know, honestly, I hadn't read a bunch of it when I was given it. You know, it wasn't my cup of tea. And I really thought, because the previous 2 editors that were in charge of the New Universe, within the first year, both were fired.
Wow.
And I suddenly was promoted.
Oh no.
To this position. And the first thing I did was, I got the promotion. I went into, I'll say his name, Tom DeFalco, who was the executive editor at that point. And when I was responsible working to, for him, he was my immediate supervisor,
right?
And then there was the editor-in-chief above him, and I went to Tom when I was told I was getting the promotion. I said, Tom,
are you guys firing me?
Well, Lewis, is there anything you can do to keep me in the, in this position? Pass me over, give it to somebody else. And Tom, in his so eloquent way, and I don't know if you know this, but everybody that worked on staff with with Tom at the time had to do an impersonation of him. So Tom said to me, "The thing of it is, Mr. Howard, you're screwed no matter what." He said, you take the job, you got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, and if you don't take the job, you're never going anywhere.
Oh.
So I took the job.
Oh.
And 2 weeks later, the editor-in-chief was let go from Marvel.
Right.
And I came back, and I was on vacation when that happened, by the way. So I came back to a very different office.
I'll bet.
And then suddenly I had free reign of what to do and what we had to do. Like there were some books that were selling so low that we had to let them go. And then there was the core books where, when I say I had free reign, I was answering to Mark Grunwald, which was a comfortable position for me because he was now the executive editor.
Right.
And then Tom was the editor-in-chief.
Now, is that when they went to the 5 different editor-in-chiefs?
No.
That
happened after Tom.
Okay.
That was well after that period.
So
that was time in the mid-90s. What I'm talking about is 86, I think. 86.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I just want to interrupt to say that again, this sounds all very happily ever after.
It does, doesn't it?
Which is like, you had
not a minute spent. Not a minute spent in independent comics at all.
No
real struggle getting the job or holding the job. And the person who could have fired you when you took your new position got himself fired while you were on vacation. So you came back and all that hand wringing was for naught because now you're the guy.
Yes. And I say this sometimes. There was a period of which I was doing a bunch of conventions where they would put me on this panel about how to break into comic books. And I remember very clearly, I did Boston. It was Fan Expo Boston. I'm sitting up there, and I was obviously the token old guy. Okay, so I'm there with people who were either, what's his name? Really nice guy whose name I can't remember. Anyway, there were a bunch of us there, and it was round robin questions, and the first question was, what is the first character that you got to do? First comic book that got you into comics writing wise. And this was for writers. And everybody's going around and everybody had either an indie story or they started out in digital comics, which is venues that were not really open.
Right.
And then it gets to me. I don't know if you're familiar with the writer Teenie Howard. She was working at Marvel at that time, and she was sitting right next to me. And I said, well, and I gave the story about my my first job being writing an issue of Iron Man, and she just turned around and she smacked me. You kidding me?
Yeah.
And then later on, they go there, and again, these are all relatively young people who were just getting into the industry, and it's how many comics have you done in your career? And I'm just,
there we go.
And there were people, or 10 or 20 or whatever. The guy next to me, what's his name? Matt Rosenberg? Is that he's? I think he's still working in comics, but he was very big at Marvel at the time. This is going back a number of years ago. And he was very proud because he had just finished writing his 100th script. And nice. I go, how do I not look like an asshole now?
Right.
So I said, answering the question, yes, I have written somewhat more than 100 comics. And the truth was that it was closer to 700 at that point. So it was a very, very different. I mean, number one again. Oops,
Yeah, but it's
going back to I talk with my hands. This is an occupational hazard. I'm old, been in the business a long time, but also in the 90s in particular, I was writing a lot.
right.
There were times when I was writing 4 or 5 comics a month.
That's crazy. That's a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know how I did it without dying. That's it. I'm actually 29 years old. And
those were hard years.
Yes. Yeah. So what made you decide then to make the shift from editing to full-time freelancer? What was it something without names? Was it something that you just said, all right, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. I got to go do this, or what made you decide to do it?
I had so much writing work coming at me. And I also, what it was I did the Iron Man issue, and then I kept getting offered bits and pieces of things.
Right.
Chuck Norris, R.I.P., and his Karate Commandos. That was my second job that I did, was one issue of Chuck Norris and his Karate Commandos. Well, I wrote 2. Only one was published before the book was canceled. And then, when I did a fill-in for Power Pack. And I did, and I did some toy comics, this series called Air Raiders, which I just recently realized the artist on that was Kelly Jones.
Really?
Oh.
So, and I wrote, and we became Facebook friends, and I said, I was just thinking the trajectory of our careers, that we started out together on this, crappy Mattel, Transformers wannabe toy comic, to me writing Ghost Rider and you becoming like the Batman artist for the longest time. It just kind of was mind-boggling.
So do you think that you were being tested by these sort of things, or were you just, this was the work that was available and you were there, and so it was the
work that was available, and it was, I mean, I know I'm speaking to some comic book editors here, but editors will take the path of least resistance sometimes.
Yeah.
No.
So look, you're a warm body and you have fingers that will move along a keyboard. You want to do something for me?
You can make the deadline,
but
you're
also,
in. Come on.
You're also familiar with the way the system works, and you're familiar with the titles. So
yes, but going back to Roland's point, that was a key point for me, which was I made the deadline. I was available for whatever, because I was trying to market myself. Right. And then I had gotten married. We had our first child, my daughter, who I wanted to make more money, so I was taking on more work. I then got solo Avengers that then became Avengers Spotlight. I took over the Hawkeye stories from Tom DeFalco. And that was, and again, it was working for Mark Grunwald. And that was my real training ground. And, as I'd said, I really lucked out. And I tell these guys, I say it in every interview, and I tell them whenever I see them, the 2 artists that I worked with early on who were so pertinent to my learning how to tell a comic book story, how to write a comic book story so an artist could illustrate it, was Alex Savia, because I worked on a bunch of things with him, including my first one, and Alan Milgram, who I believe are 2 of the best pure storytellers in the business for comic books. And so I learned how to think in comics by like, I write this, that's what they draw. Great.
Yeah.
And so that's I was doing that. And then one day I was still on staff, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but you're going to get here eventually. I was still working on staff, and Mark came into my office. He was executive editor, and we had spent a lot of time in our little 10 by 10 office. And late at night, putting together the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, you just talk about stuff.
Right.
And I frequently told him how much I really liked Ghost Rider. that was a character that really spoke to me. And Mark came into my office and said to me, Howard, we're thinking about bringing Ghost Rider back in his own series. Do you want to give a pitch? I said, yeah. Now, what I didn't know was they had reached out to
a couple of others.
About 10 others.
Wow, that's a lot.
All of whom were way more experienced and seasoned than I was. And they got pitches from everybody. And if I had known that, and which is probably why Mark didn't tell me, it would have frozen me in my tracks. I said, no, you're good. Go with one of those guys. And as he was leaving the office, though, he almost ruined it for me, because he said, one caveat. I said, yeah. He said, you can't use Johnny Blaze. And I said, what? That's like one of the coolest names in comics. He said, nope. We want an all new character, so just do that. And so I pitched it, and it was the one that was accepted, and it was almost didn't see print.
Really?
The marketing people at Marvel were dead set against it, because I
guess what part? The fact that it wasn't Johnny Blaze?
No, it was a failed character, because it was canceled for low sales. An unknown writer, basically. I was doing just little things here and there with 2 unknown artists. It was Javier Saltares and inked by Mark Texera. And they said, we can't sell this. And I had to, and I've spoken to Tom about this, because Tom was the editor-in-chief at the time, and I had to keep, because they said, okay, we can't do it as an ongoing series. Let's do it as a mini series.
Okay.
So, and as a writer, every time you have to think of it that way, now you have to restructure what it is. And you know what? No, that's not going to work. We'll do it as a graphic novel.
Okay.
I had to restructure it that way. Then it was right after Dark Knight came out, so it was okay. You know what? We are going to do it as a miniseries, but we're going to do it as Dark Knight format,
prestige format. Yeah,
and then eventually, the head of marketing wrote an impassioned letter, apparently, to Mike Hobson, who was the publisher of Marvel. It's all the reasons why we should not be putting money, time, and effort to publishing this book.
Wow.
And it was right around that time that DeFalco, in his, again, the way he could, hell with this. We're just doing it the way I want to do it. And so we put it out as a regular ongoing series. And after the sales came out on the first couple of issues, the head of marketing was very gracious. She walked into Tom's office, stood in the doorway with the memo in her hand, and ripped it up and threw it in the trash and said I was wrong. So,
wow. You don't hear those words very often, do you?
What's funny about the whole argument? What's funny about the whole argument is comic books, not just Marvel, but all comic books, always revive characters that got canceled for low sales.
Yeah.
Constantly. They're always coming back. They're rising from the grave. They're bringing them back from low sales. They're giving them a new creative team.
This was 1991. Let's just put that, it was 91. So it wasn't happening as often. And to Tom's point was, well, the selling part is your job.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to give you a good product. Your job is to figure out how to get that into the stores.
Right.
So, So anyway, to the original question, that started, and now suddenly I had to keep it going. And so I was still, when that started, I was still working
on staff.
On staff. And we had a small apartment, and we had a 1-bedroom apartment, and we had a newborn. and well, no, she wasn't newborn. She was like a year and a half, 2 years old before we really knew how it was going to sell. And my wife was pregnant with our second child. And
we need another room.
well, and more importantly, I wasn't getting any time with my daughter. I was working in the city. We lived about an hour north of Manhattan, and I would come home just in time to tuck her into bed. And I said, this is ridiculous, and we're going to have a second kid, and I can't do it. And I said, because I had a sense that Ghost Rider was doing well, and to the incentive point, I didn't know what that was going to turn out to be. It turned out to be very nice. And I thought, I said to Deb, I think I might try to do this full time. And she was completely supportive. We didn't know how much work I would be able to get. And I went into DeFalco and I said, I think this is what I want to do. He said, okay, we'll give you a contract. And he was very helpful even in that regards, because the way Marvel contracts work. But it meant like none of my benefits changed at all. No, I had full insurance. Nothing changed. I just was making more money, and I got to stay at home. And because we had the 1-bedroom apartment, I had to rent an office behind a liquor store.
Yes.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Dream.
That's dangerous for a writer, isn't it?
No, I was too busy. I couldn't drink at all back then because I was working until 4:00 in the morning. But the day I left staff, all of a sudden, when Danny Fingeroth heard that I was leaving staff, he said, "You want to take on a Spider-Man book?"
No way.
And I got Web of Spider-Man so I left staff with Ghost Rider and Web of Spider-Man in my pocket, and then and I eventually quit Web because there was a point where I was doing that, Ghost Rider, and then I did a bunch of work for Marvel Comics Presents, and I did a Havoc storyline.
I remember that one. Yeah.
And I remember one day getting like all 3 of the comics at the same time, and I don't tend to reread my stuff because all I can see are the mistakes.
I should have done this.
I was reading just little bits and pieces, and I realized that Danny Ketch, my Ghost Rider protagonist, and Peter Parker, and Scott Summers? No, Alex Summers. Thank you.
Summers.
They all sounded exactly alike, and they all sounded like me. And I went, "Oh no, this is not good for my writing." So I quit Web of Spider-Man, which I was doing with Alex Saviuk, and I loved doing it. I quit just to kind of recenter myself as a writer, and it's like 3 months later, or some ridiculously short period of time, where I ran into Danny, and he said, Todd is leaving Spider-Man, adjectiveless Spider-Man, and do you want to take it over? And I said, Danny,
I just left Web.
Do you think the problem I had was with the adjective? And I said yes. and
I said yes.
And so then I was doing those 2 books for a long time. I mean, it was back in a day where people did more than 5-issue runs.
Right.
I did Ghost Rider for close to 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a long time.
And some permutation of Spider-Man for about the same.
Yeah,
because I did the adjectiveless book. I did Web earlier, adjectiveless, and then later on I did Amazing and adjectiveless. So
David X. Gura says Danny Ketch Ghost Rider was fantastic. Says
he was.
Ghost Rider created a whole niche.
Yes,
created a whole corner of Marvel. I mean,
much to my chagrin. He became, or I became, a victim of his popularity at the time, because there was a period when because the sales were very good. on Ghost Rider, and they just everybody wanted then to guest star Ghost Rider. In their books,
of course.
And and then that meant I had to, sometimes Bobby, who's the editor, would run the plots by me, and and it just became ridiculous. And then it led to, it was so popular that we created the Midnight Suns, which was an imprint that had a bunch of other horror or horror adjacent comics tied into it, and I was so dead set against it. I've spoken. I'm still good friends with Bobby Chase, and I will talk about how petulant I was. I was the petulant freelancer at that time, and we were at a meeting, like back then when comics were in there.
Yeah,
they're big times, and the sales wise, we would go off and have conferences, and we were sitting in a conference room talking about Midnight Sun, and I'm sitting around the table with Bobby and her assistant, who I think was Chris Cooper at the time, and then a bunch, Greg Wright and Dan Chichester, and they're all there, and everybody's sitting around the table, and I was such a pissy little baby that I wouldn't even sit at the table. Like there was this bank of radiators with windows, and I just sat up there like looking out, and I was in my, I'm wearing all black, and my hair at that time was halfway down my back, and I probably
do you have a little eyeliner on, and I was all cool?
No, but I had sunglasses. I was wearing my sunglasses, and this is stupid, and why do I have to be part of this? And I've spoken to Dan about it too, Dan Chichester, and he threw out one slight idea, which was about doing something with Lilith, who in Hebrew lore was Adam's first wife and the mother of all demons. And I went, oh. And all of a sudden, I got my pissy butt off of the radiator, and I'm sitting at the table, and we're throwing ideas around, and I genuinely loved the idea at the time. But and so I just was and the work just it was that, and then I did at that point I did Ghost Rider, and then they wanted a spin-off of Ghost Rider, so I did Spirits of Vengeance, and I was writing Spider-Man, and then and then I was picking up Hearts of Darkness. I did this one-shot Hearts of Darkness that was drawn by John Romita Jr., and it featured Ghost Rider, Punisher, and Wolverine. Or like, oh, this is a license to print money,
right?
And so I was working nonstop.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point I was walking around the office, and Bob Harris, who is still a good friend of mine, he was the X-Men editor, and I came up to the offices like the day the sales figures were released on Hearts of Darkness, and all of a sudden I could see Bob Harris walking towards me in the bullpen, and I'm like, okay, Bob and I started out as assistants together, and but he's walking towards me in a way that this is not my buddy. Bob was best man at my wedding and my daughter's godfather. Okay. And, hey, Howard, how you doing? Yeah. He said, come on, let's walk. And he said, have you ever wanted to work for the X-Men office? And I said, yeah, really. And he was shocked. Nobody had ever said that to him before. I said, no, and I'm really happy doing what I'm doing right now. And he said, are there any of the X-Men characters you like that you'd like to write? I said, not really.
And I can't imagine he heard that very often.
No, never. And he said, Howard, give me something. I said, well, I kind of like Gambit. Like, what I like what Chris has done with Gambit. He's great. Let's have lunch. And then I did a Gambit limited series with Lee Weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And you were working Marvel Method at the time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to clarify, because I know Marvel Method is discussed a lot on social media, and it's it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Marvel Method, often they're talking about what everybody thinks.
Right.
How Stan worked with Jack and Steve.
Right.
It's generally in a way that they can throw barbs at Stan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was not my experience now, but even within all of us who worked Marvel Method, there's a wide variety. Like when I was an editor, I loved working with Peter David. He did Justice for me in the New Universe because I loved reading his plots.
Yeah.
The Marvel Method plots, because they read like short stories.
Right.
Which, I mean, it just was a pleasurable read. Then, and DeFalco and I talk about this a lot. Tom is a nuts and bolts plotter, okay, where he writes and he describes what happens page by page, and that's it. I can't work that way. So I do that. I do, describe what happens, but I have to put dialogue in there, or I'm not going to remember what I was thinking. And also, I think it helps inform the artist as to facial expression or body movement or something like that. So there's a lot of wiggle room in what's described as Marvel Method.
Right.
And also, I find that when I work that way and I use dialogue, I drop dialogue in as well, also for my benefit, because it gives me, when the art comes back, and there's those elements of surprise that the artist found that I didn't plan for.
Those happy accidents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can refer back to my original dialogue, and I'm not starting from scratch. I can re-edit.
Yeah. So
I'm a little bit ahead of the game.
And gives the artist context.
Yeah. My first draft of a script then, which follows the Marvel Method plot, is really a second draft, because I've got most of the dialogue in there, aside from as you say, when you see the art, you change things a little bit. I worked with Adam Kubert and on Spirits of Vengeance, and he was always dropping that kind of stuff in, and I loved it. I mean, I don't like, I have worked full script. Now, I'm not a big fan of working full script, because I think it takes away the thing that I thought worked best in the Marvel Method, which was the genuine collaboration between the writer and the artist.
Right.
I like, getting something back that's slightly different than what I wrote, but that is still sticking with the spirit of what I was writing or intending to write. Yeah.
Because I always think it's like, I heard stories about Neil Simon, who when he writes something, he demands the actor say it exactly as he wrote it, because he's the guy and he's in charge or whatever. Right. But I've worked with actors before, and I like to see what the actors bring to it that I didn't see.
Yeah.
And that same reason I like to collaborate with an artist, because it's not top down.
Exactly.
It's we're collaborating, and that's why I like to talk to the colorist too. It's like, these are the things that are in my head.
Yeah.
Where can we go to make this better?
Yeah. And this is what we think about that.
Yep.
There are some folks hear us talk about this sometimes, that I get these private messages. I don't understand Marvel Method. It sounds to me like you're just shortcutting. I'm like, no, clearly you don't understand Marvel Method.
No. What I like about what you're saying, Howard, is that because of the way the industry worked back then in the 90s, whatever, you got to have long runs with basically the same artist.
Yes.
For 50 issues, 60 issues, whatever.
What I always like when I'm working with an artist to have an open dialogue with them. So even before we started, and I didn't realize how much I did it until a number of years ago. I was on a panel with Tom Lyle, who, unfortunately we lost, and I worked with Tom on a Spider-Man run, and when we were talking, he said, well, one of the best things Howard did was the day that we were teamed up, he called me and said, what kinds of things do you like to draw?
Yeah.
And what kinds of things don't you like to draw?
Right.
Because, I won't allow it to dictate story if an element is called for in the, the organic creation story, it's okay for me to have that in my mind. And, what characters do you, especially with something like Spider-Man, where you have so much of history to draw from. It's okay for me. And I've gotten into an argument with Howard Chaykin about this. I
think that's the wrong question to ask.
Yes. But I think it works best when there's a genuine collaboration. And I didn't ever see it as a shortcut, the Marvel method. As I said, there's a wide variety. I think Chris Claremont, when he would do a plot, he would give so much description. It was like, have you ever read an Alan Moore?
Oh my God, yeah.
I haven't read an Alan Moore script. Yeah.
He does full script, but
every detail.
The same thing. Like he could turn in a 30 pages of plot for a 22-page comic book.
I've never seen a Claremont's plot. I've never seen one of that.
In the day, and that's why I loved when I was on staff, and to this day, I love reading other people's work, because you never know what you're going to glean from it.
Right.
Sometimes something silly like, I really like that typeface, or
well, and also I think as relates to the Marvel method, you correct me if you disagree. I think it depends on the artist as well, as to what level of detail does the artist need from you. Right. Or do they want from you?
Yes. Right. I was very fortunate with the artists I got to work with. I mean, I know that. As I said, I learned from many of them, but then, I work, aside from Alex Saviak and Alan Milgram, and I worked with John Byrne for a long time. John Romita Jr. and I had we did a bunch of stuff together, and Ron Garney, and I got Joe Kubert drew something that I wrote, and that's another one where I wasn't a comic book fan where I was always paying attention to names.
Right.
Well, at one point in the story, he has Ghost Rider standing in a way from with like this cocked hip and his arm over here, and I went, oh crap, that's Sergeant Rock. I grew up reading this. I know who Joe Gilbert is. And at that point, I had already been. The only reason he did it was because I had worked with and was friends with Adam and Andy.
Right.
And I said, "Oh my God." But it does. And I dare say there are not. I don't know that people could do Marvel method today. Writers couldn't, because there aren't artists that are trained in working that way, and there aren't editors working in the industry, save for one or two, who would know how to train artists to work Marvel method, and because it is a very specific skill set, in my opinion. And so I do more of my work these days is full script. Which it doesn't feel so as natural to me. What that means for me personally is I write it Marvel method for me, and then I go and break it down to a script before it goes.
You're still working Marvel method, but as a shortcut to get to the full script.
Yeah. Thomas Fromanti, he said, howdy ho, neighbors. Sorry I couldn't make it on the show tonight. Happy Easter, everybody. Happy Easter to you, Tommy. We missed you, and we're going to talk about you when the show ends, just because you're not here.
Excellent.
Tommy might have actually inked some of the stuff that Thomas Fioramonti might have inked some of the stuff that you wrote. He did a bunch of inking for Marvel around those years as well.
Yes, he was one of Palmiotti's assistants for a while.
Okay. Well, Palmiotti was Tex's assistant.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, as always happens, our clock has just zipped right through.
Yeah, we got to have you back on.
Yeah, well, absolutely do. So before we go though, what are you doing now? Where can folks find you now? If they're like, man, you know what? I miss me some Howard Mackie ghostwriter. What's he doing today? What are you doing today? And where can they go to find you?
I am working for my buddy Terry Kavanaugh, who was longtime Marvel editor.
Yeah.
And
who did tell me he would come on and talk with us as well.
Oh, well, Terry's good, and I guarantee you he'll try to get me to come on at the same time because we play off of each other very well. But Terry is one of my best friends, and he is working for a company called 24/7 Comics, which I am doing 4 different projects for right now. And I'm having fun. One of them is going to
4 different projects.
4.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the projects is going to reunite me with some of the original Ghost Rider folk.
Nice.
So, which is really feeling good to me right now. I mean, it started out with the artist and I were reconnecting, and then the colorist said, "Well, I'll color anything."
I want in too.
I'm being very cagey because until I'm not. And then I said, "Well, you know, the letterer should." So we're all going to be pulled back together.
So when do you think you'll be able to talk about that?
I think with certainly before San Diego, but
that's when we should have Terry on.
Yeah,
and then he'll drag you in.
Yeah, and see, Terry's one of those guys because I trust him. Aside from being my friend, and that doesn't stop me from yelling at him if I disagree with him, but I trust him as because he and I have worked together both writing, and he has been my editor on multiple projects. But it's important for me certainly at this stage and age that I trust the person that I'm going to be working with, and we've worked on things where I will say at one point I was working for a major comic book company. I will not mention the 2-lettered companies.
AC.
Yeah. I was working for them doing a project, and I was working for Terry for a small indie company whose name I won't mention because it was ultimately turned out not to be a great experience, not because of him. But I was getting paid much more per page at the major company than I was. It was at DC. Yeah, because nobody I worked for is there anymore.
Right.
But there was such dysfunction on the editorial end. That I was rewriting anything I did like 3 or 4 times because as it got bumped up the chain of command, they had notes, and that meant I had to go back and rewrite it. And then I was working for Terry for this smaller company where my page rate was almost half of what I was doing. I was only doing it as a favor to Terry, but it would be this as opposed to, oh, here are the notes from each one of these people. I would send something to Terry. He would read it and he said, "Yeah, I liked it. What about if you did this?" And so "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." I'd go and I'd rewrite it and I was done. I felt like even though I was getting paid half, it almost felt like it was twice as much. And that's what I look for at this stage in my career. I just want to work with people who I trust and respect. Yeah. And don't tell Terry that I respect him.
Mom's a word.
So my whole takeaway from all of this, and thank you, Howard, for being here. This has been very fun and a great conversation. My takeaway really is that you are still friends with your Marvel guys from that period.
Yeah,
and you still maybe not daily friends, but you still keep in touch. You still work on projects together. You hang out when you get a chance, and I think for me that feels like an essential part of the Marvel experience of what the 90s were.
It was unique to that period because early on I learned that because a lot of these guys, many of these names I mentioned, Bob Harris, Terry Kavanaugh, Bobby Chase, Danny Fingeroth. These are people that they were my contemporaries when I was on staff.
Right.
And I knew at a certain point that I had to like turn off certain or separate parts of my brain because I had like shouting matches with some of these people as my editors.
Right.
And then afterwards we were going out for dinner, or, you know, like in one case, well, Bobby Chase and I had like a major falling out, and I came home and I was so angry. And Deb said to me, "Are you okay? Because, you know, the babysitter is coming over, you know, in a few minutes. We're supposed to go out." And I said, yeah. And I came, the doorbell rang, and I answered the door, and it was Bobby and her husband, Craig, were babysitting. It's done. You know, it's done. One thing is work, one thing is social. And I was able to do that. And we spent recently some time with Bobby and Craig. And, you know, I talked to Terry Kavanaugh all the time, and Bob Harris and DeFalco and all these people. Yeah, I feel very fortunate in all of that I maintained, you know, some really good, forged and maintained some great friendships.
I had a friend who was at DC in the early 90s, and he said that Wolfman and Ween and Mike Barr, when they were on staff, they would scream at each other throughout the day about the work. And then at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock quitting time, they'd just knock on each other's door like, "Where are we going to eat tonight? What movie are we going to see?"
Mark Grunwald was one of my best friends. He was my mentor when I was an editor, and he was executive editor. And there were some conflicts of interest because I was editing books that I was the assistant on under him and all that. And he came in, he misread the situation. And I can say whatever I want right now because he also is that. So, hey, what is he going to do? But he came charging down to my office and started screaming at me. And I'm a very nice, mellow guy until I'm not. You know, I'm from Brooklyn, okay? And I'm screaming, as I always say, and I said this to him, you know, we were facing each other, you know, forehead to chin, because Mark was shorter than I am. And to the point where DeFalco thought we were going to come to blows. And he came lumbering in after us and like put his two beefy hands like on, because we were like screaming at each other like this close. And Tom just like pushed us aside and made Mark get out of the office. I threatened to quit. I said, "This bullshit." Sorry. You know, that, you know, I didn't want to deal with this anymore. And that was, you know, like 9 o'clock in the morning. And at noon, all of a sudden, Mark was at my door and office said, "Yeah, I'm going to go grab lunch at, you know, our favorite restaurant with cute waitresses. Can you go in like 15 minutes?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure." And that was it. It was done. It was just done because it was comic books. It wasn't anything worth losing a friendship over.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for coming. It's
definitely thank you.
Yeah,
you got to cut me off because I can just talk.
Well, no, you know what? I'll get on you again. We'll get you back here for a part 2.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Yeah.
So now that you've been here, done it, seen that you're safe, right?
You won't be next time.
And still awake.
Still awake. Yeah.
That's it.
And go ahead, Tom.
It's East Coast bedtime.
That's right. Okay, so on Tuesday, that Silverline show on Tuesday, how to pitch your comic. Join us for another Saturday night with Silverline Comics. We're diving into comics, creativity, behind the scenes insights, and whatever fun surprises come our way. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering Silverline, who wrote this so long? So you made your comic and now you're not sure how to get people interested. What's a log line anyway? We'll go over the tried and tested ways to pitch your comic, whether it's online, at a show, or at a shop. That is Tuesday for that Silverline show on Tuesday. On Wednesday, Comics Creators in Chaos. It's time for Wednesday Wham. Join the Silverline crew for a high energy night of comic talk, creator insights, and plenty of unexpected moments. We're bringing the fun, the stories, the passion for indie comics. Don't miss it. Next week, Howard, you might enjoy this one. The first 5 pages of your comic. Readers have a lot of choices for their comic purchases, so you've got to hook them in a hurry We'll talk about what should be in the first 5 pages of your comic to hook the reader and convince them to put down their hard-earned money for your comic. That is next week. Tom, Mike, Howard, either one of you, anywhere you're going to be at the shows? Where are you going to be next? Howard, where are you going to show up next at the show?
Yeah, I had taken a break from shows because I had a little brain injury last year or 2 years ago. No, seriously.
No, I remember that. Yes. Yeah. The fact that you called it a little brain injury is what I was laughing at. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I almost died. But I'm going to be at Three Rivers
in Pittsburgh. Okay.
Which is in June, beginning of June. Oh, I'm going to be up in Vermont at Vermont Science Fiction and Horror Fest end of this month.
Okay, cool.
And then I do Heroes Con because I love that show, which is in Charlotte.
I will be at Heroes this year.
Oh, you will? Okay,
I will. Cool. I sure will. So I'll look you up.
Yeah, you'll get to meet Deb.
My wife's coming with me, so it'll be great.
Excellent. And I have a couple of others that I don't know if they've been announced. I might be going to San Diego this year. I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm just starting to, like I said, last year I only did Heroes.
Right.
And no, I didn't do Heroes.
I didn't do Heroes last year. No, I was there.
Of plane issues. But I think I did one show somewhere last year, but the year before it was Heroes because of the whole rain thing. When I see you at Heroes, I'll make you there. I have a really nice hole.
Oh, really?
Here. Yeah.
Really?
Deb says I get too aggressive in making everybody touch it. I was thinking,
I might be shy.
Do something where I say, okay, you donate $5. What is it called? Heroes.
Please do not make a sign that says "touch my hole."
$5. It's gonna be a fetish for someone.
Anyway, so yeah, I'm doing a few more shows this year.
Well, I look forward to seeing you at Heroes Con this year.
Sounds good.
Tom, Mike, anything upcoming?
I'll be at San Diego trying to stalk Howard if he shows up.
There you go.
Nothing yet.
Say again, Mike?
Nothing yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right. Well, Howard, hang out a few minutes after if you can.
Sure.
Until next week, you guys remember to
Make
mine Silverline. Good night, everyone.
Hey, this is Paul Pelletier. Make mine Silverline. Is that okay, Roland?